Well, first of all, thanks very much to Paul for producing this, because he's done a really good job on this book. I'm so pleased about it. It's excellent. The quality of the printing and putting it together, collating, really exactly what I wanted. So thank you to that. Thank you to Paul. Thanks also to Melanie for the foreword. Melanie is, I knew her, as she says in the foreword, I knew her sort of 20 odd years ago. She's now a hugely talented writer. And it was I was hoping that she would do the foreword, because she's one of my favorite writers. So thanks to her as well. Thank you to my reviewers, some of whom are here tonight: Kath, Helen, Rod, Paul, Dave, and Harvey. And thanks to the rest of you tonight, if you're on Facebook and you've bothered to come along and have a look. Paul will be monitoring the Flapjack Press Facebook page for any questions you might want to leave in the comment section, as we trot through. So that's my bit. Let's get on with some poems. So yes, as Paul says, this is my first sort of major collection, if you like. I had these two before, Waiting for the Cactus and Strategic Fit, from way back. The first one was 16 years ago. And then the next one after that was about another 5 years later. And then I sort of did an awful lot of editing and even ghostwriting for people. And so I didn't write so much poetry myself. But then I refound my muse, if you like, and got back into it, writing and sending off, submitting things to different magazines and online things, and getting accepted in some. So that was a good good to get back into that. The songs of submission, people have asked about this, and in fact one of the reviewers said there's no submission in here. As an editor, people always say, I'm sending you my submission. So that's partly where it came from, please accept my submission for your magazine, It's nothing to do with bondage or anything, not that sort of submission at all. It's just, that's what it's to do with. And also I realized that I probably am, at times, my wife would totally disagree, but at times I can be quite submissive as well. But at times. Right. Talking of times, these are, as we all know, uncertain times. And even before Ukraine and that, the times were very uncertain. And things that are always reliably the same are still miraculous, and yet we easily take them for granted. So the first poem I'm going to read, which is called Waiting for the Light, is exactly about that, about the miracle, and if only everything was as straightforward in the world, especially when you add in Ukraine as well. So Waiting for the Light. I want to check, by the way, whether you can all hear me okay. If you can't, please wave now, and then I'll, if you are, thumbs up if you can. Yeah, there you are. Okay, yeah, good, fine. And on Facebook, of course, you can. Waiting for the Light. We are walking with our lamps, mine on my head and yours round your neck, while most are still asleep. An early car whispers along the main road. The nurse off up to Chester for the day shift. Then, coming the other way, the first of the rumbling milk tankers. No other traffic. And we cross over and stroll down the lane until the last of the houses, the metal gate, the meadow, but it's still frozen night at 6:30, too dark to go our separate ways, so we wait beside the gate just a few minutes till the blackness melts and the dawn slides in like a latecomer and opens the sky. And I can make out the far hedge and the next gate our lamps are off now, and you're away, hurtling through the smoky half-light, swerving off on a huge arc. And by the time I've crossed the meadow, this daily miracle has been and gone. We are no longer waiting for the light. And I wish it were all as dependable as this. I wish. So that's number one. The next one is also a reflection, I imagine, well, no, I don't imagine, I know, of what we've been through recently, with all the upsets and the traumas and things which people have suffered in the last few years. And this is called breakfast. And I must admit, I was rather ashamed to catch myself one day saying to myself in a cafe, this coffee is too hot. What a disgraceful thing to say. You know, some people don't even get water, do they? They don't get enough to eat and so on. And we all have our own favorite food and drink, but for some, as you'll see, it's a bit different. Breakfast. For some, it has to be a boiled egg. For others, two. The suicidal like to risk it all on a full English, whilst others cannot live without a Tesco croissant fresh from the freezer, microwaved into crumbling flakes. The Dutch like sprinkles in sandwiches and slices of cheese, and the French have been dunking their tartine for centuries. But while we agonize over white or brown toast and jam or honey or marmalade before we tuck in, those whose breakfast is chemical wait to see if the legs will move today. Others on the ventilators have their hands held, and others take their last sip of water. So quite a lot of different types of breakfast there. The next poem is about how people see things differently, which is reality and which is illusion. Are there just lots of different realities? That's a question I ask myself quite a bit. And this one is set in Nantwich, which is just up the road from here, 5 miles away. And it's a bench seat by the River Weaver, which flows through Nantwich. There's a lovely walk called the Nantwich Loop, where you go down the path by the river and around the Salt Lake and so on. So the one seat, this is called. This is the seat beside the path alongside the Weaver in Nantwich, a seat set in shade. Opposite the seat, across the river, there is an embankment, but the railway line hides away. So when a train comes through, it is gliding on grass. Beyond the line, a field, then trees, and above the trees, crows flap and wheel, and above the crows, clouds under blue, and contrails of planes heading south from Liverpool. All this from the one seat. Another day, someone else in the one seat. The view changes, the path and greetings from strangers, the river with swans and cygnets, the obvious railway line, some trees, some birds, a sky. The next two I'm going to do are both have sort of Italian connections. I was very, very lucky enough to study Italian at Aberystwyth when I went there, and in Florence in Italy. And two of my favorite writers, I'll just put this in there. Right. Two of my favorite writers are from the early 19th century, probably the greatest Italian poet of the 19th century was Giacomo Leopardi. And then obviously, you know, in the Renaissance and so on, we had Dante Alighieri. So the first one is just about Leopardi. Now, he's amazing, this guy. He was, I always think of Jonathan Miller, whom people describe as a polymath and so on. But Leopardi, I mean, would have just left him in the shade, because in his short life, 38 years, he died when he was 38, he became a world authority on so many different things. His father was a count, and his mother a marchioness. They're very well off, and they had this, in those days, beginning of the 19th century, the thing to have was a library. So his father had this world-beating library. And Giacomo, the son, was in there every day until he was 21. This had a huge effect on his health. He tried to escape once to Rome, but his father found him and brought him back. He was tutored by 2 monks, and his studying rate was phenomenal, you know, 10, 12 hours a day minimum. And this is about him. He used to look out, one of his most famous poems is something called L'Infinità, or Infinity. And he used to look out of the library window, and there was a hill and then a hedge. And he couldn't see over the hedge. And over the hedge represented everything that he didn't know about, or we ever know, we don't know about life and death. It represented everything beyond, outside of his world. And this beautiful poem he wrote about it, and saying, you know, this hill was always dear to me, and so on. Anyway, this is just called Leopardi. Giacomo sits in the family library, locked in each day till he's 21. And when he emerges, a world authority on astronomy, philology, and all the other ologies, this multilingual philosopher-poet can't stand up straight. He's studied too hard. His eyesight is feeble. His back is bent. His massive intellect crushed by the view from the window. His favorite hill topped by the hedgerow that robs him of the horizon. And the wind blows in from that pure infinity beyond the gardens, the slope, and the hedge. And he dreams each night of life on the other side, and plots his escape to Rome. Leopardi. He did actually get away, only to stay with his uncle in Rome for a while, and he hated it. He thought it was a horrible, scruffy place, nothing like he'd read in all the great classical books, you know. So he was really quite disappointed when he went there. And eventually, when he was in his 30s, he managed to go to other towns, but in a very sheltered life. The other one has also got an Italian connection, and this is about Dante in a way, and it's called Tiramisu, which, as you all know, is an Italian dessert. And in Italian, tiramisu means pick me up. And I suppose it's because of the coffee in the dessert that it picks you up. So Dante, incredible, you know, as big as Shakespeare in Italy, and wrote this book about the Divine Comedy, which is about hell, purgatory, and paradise. And hell is probably the most famous book of the three. And he locates people in hell, depending on how bad in his eyes, and in the church's eyes, I suppose, their sins are. So you've got circles going deeper and deeper, and the punishments, you know, are worse and worse as you go down. So, for example, there's a couple of an adulterous young couple, and they're quite high up. They're not right down the bottom, and their punishment is to just they're made into doves, and they just have to keep flying round and round. They can never come to rest. Francesca and Paolo, those two, and then you can go down, and well, you'll see. But this is almost like a therapy session, if you like. This poem starts like that. So here we go then. Feeling down, ashamed, disappointed in yourself, let's take a little guided fantasy to Dante's Inferno. You might find yourself with me in the higher circles of hell, lightly punished for lust, gluttony, greed. Yes, I'll be there. And then I'll have more than a short stay further down in circle 6 with all the other heretics. But if you look way, way down past circle 7 with all the violent herd and what seems really unfair, all the suicides, even further down, just peer into the dark void where you and I won't be going. You can't see much at all, but you can hear the sad screams and wailing, smell the burning, bubbling tar, feel the endless agony. Circle 8 is a horrendous place, a place of stark, naked dread. It's the only one with 10 trenches of filth and unbearable pain, reserved exclusively for corrupt politicians, hypocrites, liars, and their ilk. There, deep breath, up you come, and open your eyes. You're feeling better already. Right. Anthony Gormley, as we sure we know, amazing person, angel of the north and all that. But we know, living here, that he's also done these 100 cast iron statues at Crosby, and the actual installation is called Another Place. It's now a permanent home in Crosby. It moves around a bit. And if you go and count them, you may find 1 or 2 are missing because they're cleaning them up. So they just take out a couple at a time. Whatever you do, don't try and go out to the furthest one. There are warnings, signs, which my wife and I ignored, but please don't go out too far because it's incredibly dangerous and the sand becomes quicksand and you can get stuck. And the phone signal's not very good, so it's tricky. Okay. So this is, of course, at Crosby, and the title of this poem is Crosby. We had to go out further. Why were some up to their waist, others in full view? The warning sign in the car park was not for the likes of us. We had to go out further. Now, some of them were encrusted. Barnacles, seagrass, weed. Just a little further, I would be the walrus. Then we were sinking, feet bound in black, treacherous gloop, feeling the pull of that other deadly gravity until our knees were black and life hesitated. We pulled ourselves out somehow, our Saturday clothes ruined by the foul mire. Twice in retreat, we sank again, while the Gormley men scanned the horizon, awaiting others too weak to resist. Crosby. Right, this next one I'm not actually going to read, but I'm going to tell you some behind it, and you can read it for yourself when you I thought if I read them all to you, you won't want the book, will you? So the next part I'm going to talk about is about somebody, not just him, but plenty of others as well, 39 young men. But the one that I remember the most is somebody called Valentine Joe Strudwick. And Valentine, in the First World War, joined up when he was a big burly lad, and he joined up when he was 14. And at 14, they sent him to the Somme. And he got gassed, and his best friend was shot right beside him. So they sent him back home in hospital for a bit of recuperation and to clear his lungs. He didn't go home to his mum. He stayed in the hospital, and then he went straight back to the front to Ypres. And there he got shot by a stray, sniper's bullet. And he is buried in Essex Farm Cemetery near Ypres. He died aged 15 and 11 months. And Valentine Joe is just one of 39 that I know of that were killed before their 16th birthday in the First World War. Those are only the ones that I know of. And of course, there are lots of others that have never, ever been identified. So we could probably double that or treble that number of children, really, who I'll just read their names. I won't read the poem, but these are the names of those 39. Ashley and Avril and Barnett and Beckwith and Beryl and Daly and Deans and Edwards and Elks and Finucane and Flynn and Foxon and Hesford and Hughes and Huxtable and Jenkins and Jolly and Munro and Pittman and Smith and Snadden and Stewart and Stott and Strudwick and Thomas and Tilly and Townsend and Trepanitis, known as Tret, and Twyford and Walters and Watt and Webb and Wilson and Woodward and Wiley and York. The poem's called All the Gods Turned Away, for fairly obvious reasons. And it's quite relevant, well, it's very relevant, of course, always, but particularly with what's going on at the moment over in Ukraine. I just mentioned that, my next one, just bear with me when I find it. Would help if I could read the number. Let's look at the index. Sorry, here we are. 35, not 20. Right. Okay. When I first heard this word, I thought, yeah, that's just something someone's made up. But I looked it up, and it is an actual word, to gongoozle. And it means to sit and watch longboats or narrow boats, whatever you want to call them, on canals. That is what gongoozling is. And I was flabbergasted when I first heard it. But as soon as I talk to anyone now on canals, because we walk along the canal or else I go fishing on the canal, I mention the word gongoozle to these people in boats and they don't bat an eyelid. It's just, normal to them all the time. Oh, yeah. Oh, you've been gongoozling today, have you? Yeah, all right. So there is a lovely place called Grindley Brook, which has not only cheap petrol, the cheap petrol station there, because there's a private petrol concern. So all through the petrol crisis, they have fuel all the time, because it's nothing to do with the big firms. But it's also cheap, or at least it was. I mean, now it's horrendous, as we all know. So this is about gongoozling at Grindley Brook. and Grindley Brook is a staircase lock. There are lots and lots of locks, and the boat drops, quite a few, maybe 50 meters down these staircases. And I wrote it there one day, sat on the bench while I was gone goozling. Last year, possibly. Right. Gone goozling at Grindley Brook. The scrag end of March, about a week's time. The scrag end of March, sunshine and a cold wind which runs that seam between winter and summer, which was once spring. Most trees are sad, hoping for a new dress. The empty sky closes off the distant horizon, as unreachable as a rainbow. It hurts that you never get to hold it close, breathe it in. A surly northeasterly rakes the surface a while, then relents. The boats snooze at their moorings, huddled along the bank, stoked up, locked down. Come April, traffic increases. Boats climb the staircase. I can at last sit and concentrate hard on my gone goozling, that dying art of watching time unfold over water. Right. Gone goozling. This next one is two of you I know have been to this place because you've been with me, and this is a poem about a place in Lanzarote called Puerto del Carmen, down in the south there. And I've written this poem for a young waitress called Micah, whom we met twice, 2 or 3 times. And I still see her on Facebook sometimes, and she still sort of asked me to join whatever Spanish group and so on. Anyway, Puerto del Carmen. And it's just a snapshot of a moment in an afternoon on this resort. Yeah. Here we go then. It's only short, this one. 57 padlocks of love on the chains of the little promontory, where the stray black cat sleeps on his private rock, across the way from the gondola, whose tables are being laid for the late afternoon trade, of which there is none today. And the specials board is signed "All with Love!" exclamation mark. And the T-bone is listed as XXL. Behind the white-fronted sweep of the bay, the hill's outline cuts into the sky, whilst waves continue questioning the shoreline as the sun holds off the wind and pushes the afternoon into a slow dance of glittering water. Puerto del Carmen. Right, we'll now move to page 51. This is, most of the poems I write are just truth, they're just actually, like, there's one about the oak tree outside the house here, there's one about a dead bird I found. They're all true stories. Now this one isn't. It's well, it is and it isn't. It's a mixture of the two, which I conflate the truth and the fantasy, as most poets do at some time or another. This is about a dinner of academics, quite, powerful people, professors, all that sort of stuff, smallish, not a great big dinner. And my wife and I got invited to this affair, and you have to be very careful what you say with some people, so I was forewarned about what might happen and so on. So it's called Slips of the Tongue. They give me the top chair, test bed for commentary on all things erudite, or in my case, dartboard, with a blonde on either side, and the path to tread between politesse and controversy is a fine wine line. Watch your ass, shield your glass, flatter where it matters, and heed the pre-prandial warnings to keep it light, as these people count. So I try. The professor of applied neuromancy, who seems impervious to alcohol, hits me with nurture versus nature. And I go for broke and get lucky as he bellows agreement. But I blunder when his wife refers to her MSc and bar as the key to getting on. And I mishear and say that it's just a matter of getting any old crap in the right order for her editor, because he's a bigoted tart who wouldn't know a good writer from a horse. And the next morning, the other blonde reminds me that I may have burnt my gondolas around the nth bottle of Chianti. Right. Just a couple more. Some of the people who've seen, some of the ones going here have said, oh, that's my favorite. And one person liked this one, and it's called, I'd say it's a prose poem, really. It's called Back in Touch. Back in touch with friends from half a century ago, I learn that others have gone, or are all but gone, from disease, and I ponder which news saddens me more. I can accept inevitable loss, but the tragic enfeeblement of the wonderful minds of those I loved rips deep into me. And I am more than fortunate, having come close to death myself. There's no equation. The way I lived, compared to their orderly, healthy, single-partnered lifestyle, turns logic inside out as I thrive, while they get struck down, crumble, and grimace. Ever since my teens, every decade has seen more than one friend lost to suicide or just plain bad luck. Maybe we've all known this. At least with a death, you can do nothing but remember and mourn. With disease, the thwarting of future happiness and the brick wall of a worsening condition conspire to shatter your dream of rekindling a former friendship. Back in touch with friends, you can sign off all your texts with love and really mean it. Back in touch with friends. And then to finish, 34. Helen, who is here tonight, introduced me to the fabulous Granary Cafe, which I frequent these days, and I'm hoping to do some English teaching there and so on. It's an arts cafe round the back of the Riverside Dentist in Nantwich. And Katie, who runs the cafe, I showed her a copy of this. In fact, I gave her a copy of this because she's, letting me use the room there for free and so on. And she came back and she said that she liked this one the most. And I was quite surprised. I don't know why I should have been surprised. But anyway, to finish, I would like to read this. Floral Thoughts on a Train. As you sit in your carriage with your thoughts and plans and regrets and your bad decisions, which you tell yourself are better than no decision, the houses and gardens and streets and fields watch you slip past, unmoved by your worries and withheld tears, while you ignore them all, just as you ignore all these people on their phones, just as you've been discarding them like worn-out clothes, except there's no charity shop for unwanted folk. You would like to destroy the Wi-Fi, shut down every site, turn all these phones into flowers. The surprise on their faces as they look for a keypad in the middle of a rose, or try speaking into a tulip. For the first time ever, you'd watch passengers looking at each other, too traumatized to speak, dreading this new intimacy. Because without phones, they would have nothing to say. Right, thanks very much for that.